Well, a very warm welcome to the Mugello circuit. You join us on the warm-up lap ahead of the first race of the weekend for the EUROSERIES powered by Nova. It's a grid headed by Marco Helastangas from Luke Mainoni, then Oliver Fremuth, and a double winner from Misano, and that is Pavel Leftrov. The pack taking this final opportunity to sight the swoops, twists and turns of this wonderful circuit which winds its way through the Tuscany countryside. Always a spectacular place to go motor racing. I'm sure that we are going to be in for a very entertaining 50 minutes or so of action. This is the sixth and final round of what has been an excellent debut season for the EUROSERIES by Nova. We have visited some of Europe's finest circuits, starting at Paul Ricard before we went on to the Slovakia ring, then the Red Bull ring, Spa at the start of September, and then the Italian doubleheader to finish the season in Misano, and now Mugello. There is the Finnish driver Marco Helastangas, the wheel of his Ginetta G55, just weaving around, getting a little bit of heat into his tyres as we get ready for the rolling start to begin this race. So the car's 2/3 of the way through this formation lap. To give you the grid in full as they begin to form up side by side. So it's Marco Helastangas in pole position from Luca Magnoni, then Oliver Fremuth and Pavel Leftrov, Stefano Stefanelli and Salvatore Tenio on row 3 from Claudio Formenti and Gianluca Carboni. Then it's Kiro Gallagher and Gianpiero Cristoni on the 5th row, clear of Luigi Bamonte and Mark Spakavos, who is due to be at the back of the field. I'm not sure that I can see Mark there as the field form up side by side. They'll have this swooping downhill left-hand hairpin, and then we are about to go racing for the first of 2 times this weekend here at Mugello in the EUROSERIES by Nova. The field all bunched side by side. It's the black car of Marco Helastangas, the bright orange car of Luke Mainoni, then the white Megane of Oliver Fremuth, and the black Evora of Pavel Leftrov as field roll towards the gantry. We wait for the lights to change. Feels like a good long run as well. There is the light. Now they go, and away we go. Racing down towards the first turn. Who's going to get the jump? Is it going to be Marco Helastangas, or is it Luke Mainoni? It's also been a very good getaway from Pavel Leftrov. He is looking to split the 2 Ginettas as they head down towards the first turn, and that's going to be very tight, but Leftrov gets his nose in front, looks to challenge the outside as they head through the right-hander. They're all cleanly through, and then starting to climb on uphill towards swooping S-bend, and it is, however, Helastangas who's just got his nose in front of Leftrov. Then we've got Oliver Fremuth, who is next along. It's not been such a good start from Luke Mainoni. He has been shuffled a little bit down the pack as the field work their way cleanly through these opening sequence of turns. That's what they'll be looking to do, making sure that nothing goes wrong in these early stages. Plenty of racing ahead, a 50-minute race as ever in the EUROSERIES by Nova. We have got that 10-minute pit window. Comes the middle of the race from 30 minutes left on the clock to 20 minutes left on the clock, and this has been a very good first lap from Helastangas as we reach the bottom point of the circuit before climbing uphill, already trying to ease clear of Leftrov, and both of them beginning to drop. Oliver Fremuth, who is next in the queue as the field run through another of the sequence of chicanes. Then we've got a little bit of a gap back in the traffic to the next group of cars. As Leftrov looks to challenge the inside, we've got this fantastic 3-way fight going on a little bit further back. That is the squabble going on for 4th place. So flick through another of the very rapid chicanes, and really it's maybe slightly more than 3 cars disputing 4th, more likely to be a queue of 5 of the Ginettas as they turn into the hairpin at the end of the lap. There is Luke Mainoni, and he has had a pretty wretched start to proceedings. Also going well early on is Salvatore Tinio, sharing this weekend with Roberto Gentili as the field flash across the line. Now this is the opportunity for Leftrov maybe to try and close up onto Marco Helastangas as they head down towards the first corner once more. the Bulgarian driver in the Evora. Looks to challenge the inside of Heather Stangas. In fact, Heather Stangas fights back though as the circuit comes through. He takes that slightly wider line as he then climbs up out of turn 1 into the chicane. Fourth place then Stefano Stefanelli in the sky blue Ginetta. He's got Tinio and Magnoni just behind him, but Stefanelli doing a very solid job. Good to see him well up the field as catching a glimpse there of Salvador Tinio in 5th place. Luca Magnoni just in behind him. Oliver Frameworth, the only driver who's a little bit lonely at this stage of the race, you might suggest, because he is lurking with intent there in 3rd place, but he's not really able to gain too much ground on the leading duo just at the moment. Some great racing going on then in these early stages. Brilliant fight that we've got by Stefano Stefanelli, but now it's Salvador Tinio looking to make move the inside of Stefanelli, and he sneaks through. Great pass there by Tinio, but he's got, as you can see, that queue of cars beginning to form up behind, and now Luca Magnoni also taking his turn to look to challenge Stefanelli, and Magnoni tries to squeeze to the inside, can't quite do it. That leaves him vulnerable to a little bit of a challenge to the outside as well. I think he's going to be able to withstand that. And that is the number 2 car coming into the mix as well. That is Gianluca Carboni, newcomer to the series this year, as the pink Ginetta has its headlights ablaze. Here's another look then at the pass from Tinio to the inside of Stefanelli. Absolutely textbook stuff. Space to the inside, uses the curb and is able to squeeze past. This the fight for 4th place. We're just over 4 minutes or so into the race as the field flash through into another lap. Front of the pack it is Marco Heather-Stangas who leads the way from Pavel Leftrov and Oliver Framuth. And then we have got this fight headed by the red Ginetta of Salvador Tinio. He has got Stefano Stefanelli just in behind him. Oh, and that's a problem there for Mark Spekavos, who has been very rapid this year, most notably Misano last month, but he runs into trouble very early on and unfortunately doesn't make it to the end of the 2nd lap of the race. We're into lap 3. We are 5 minutes in, and this is one of the battles of the year. Stefanelli defends from the orange car of Luca Magnoni. They have got and Gianluca Carboni just tucked up behind them, using all of the road, all the curbs, as well as Stefano Stefanelli. He needs to be careful here, because that is when he starts to leave himself a little bit vulnerable. There is the stricken car of Mark Spekavos. Unfortunately, he is quite clearly out of the running. The field run through another of these quick chicanes. And that is a good run here for Luca Magnoni, and Stefano Stefanelli is going to have to defend, and doesn't he know it? He moves only now across the racing line, having covered the inside just to make sure there was no way through into the right-hand hairpin. But look at the pressure being applied by Luca Magnoni. He's all over the tail of Stefano Stefanelli. Stefanelli absorbing it at the moment. And all the while as they battle, you can see that Oliver Framuth not exactly romping off into the distance. Into the left-hand hairpin. It's going to conclude the 3rd lap of the race. They sprint across the start and finish line. Lap reeled off. Into lap 4 we go. And clearly Stefanelli's got a very quick car in a straight line, and that is the problem here for Luca Magnoni, that Magnoni is having to try and close that gap through bravery on the brakes. Meanwhile, Stefanelli rather fancies his chances, looking to the inside of Salvador Tinio. There is Frederick Blomstead in the pits. He will be taking over from the race leader, Marco Heather-Stangas. Some point towards the middle of the race. It's running out very wide there. Was Gianluca Carboni. So it's Heather-Stangas who leads from Pavel Leftrov, then Oliver Framuth, Salvador Tinio, Stefano Stefanelli, Luca Magnoni in 6th place. And a gap to the rest of the field. Carboni in 7th, and then Claudio Formenti in the Seat Leon in 8th place. Means that Kieran Gallagher has been rather dropped to the bottom of the field, waved yellow flags, covering the area of the circuit where we had that problem for Mark Spakevoss. Brilliant scrap now, as just running a little bit wide. There was Stefanelli, the rear of the car, just kicking out, and he slips immediately from having pressurised Salvatore Tinio to now being in a position where he's going to have to worry once more about defending from Luca Magnoni. The pair of them head downhill through the right-hand hairpin. We're almost towards the end of the lap, and this is the section of circuit through the final sector on the lap where Luca Magnoni is so strong. Again, he thinks about lining up the move into the hairpin inside Stefano Stefanelli, but we have seen on the past couple of laps that this is also where Stefanelli is possibly at his strongest, coming through this final hairpin and then along the start-to-finish straight. So there is our race leader, Marco Helastangas. This is very impressive stuff from Helastangas. The gap back to Pavel Leftrov in the Evora, then a much bigger gap back to Oliver Freymuth in the Renault Megane Trophy car. Mugello, another track that was never on the Megane Trophy calendar back. The match championship was running as part of the World Series by Renault. So the battle for the lead of the race, as we're into lap 5, 2.1 seconds. The gap from first second, then a further 4 seconds or so back to Pavel Leftrov. Leftrov is definitely being reeled in here by Salvatore Tinio, particularly now that Tinio has just been able to break away from Stefanelli, who's having his mirrors well and truly filled by the car of Luca Magnoni, and that is really what is helping Tinio's escape. But also, they maybe don't quite have the pressure they did of a few moments ago coming from Gianluca Carboni. Nonetheless, Carboni, the handful of the drivers in the race, is going to be doing the full 50 minutes single-handedly, just able to run at his own pace, let these battles in front of him play themselves out. Magnoni will also be completing the race single-handedly, whereas Stefano Stefanelli, well, he will be handing over to Luca Lorenzini through the pit window. And again, Stefanelli moves across very early to cover the line, as now Freymuth has been caught by the car in front of Tinio. This is a battle a little bit further down the field, and that is Kieran Gallagher moving to the inside of Gianpiero Cristoni. As now Freymuth, here we go, Salvatore Tinio looks to the inside, the red. Ginetta darts through, also sneaking past as well as Stefanelli. And I just wonder if Freymuth's got a problem, or he's just been pushed off the line, because Luca Magnoni, another driver who is able to take full advantage. Meanwhile, that is Claudio Formenti having a big moment in the set and clomping into the tyre wall. Now he is possibly beached there. Now, is that going to prompt the safety car? Certainly he'll need some sort of retrieval assistance. Stefanelli very, very late on the brakes to Salvatore Tinio. Tinio doesn't need to worry about that. As Stefanelli recovers into the pit lane comes Oliver Freymuth, as we are just over 20% race distance. Such a shame for Freymuth, because this has been all too often for him the story of 2015. Some brilliant pace undermined by mechanical misfortune. Here's another look then at Stefano Stefanelli. Wildly ambitious on the brakes, and as a result he has lost out to Luca Magnoni. That releases Magnoni now up into 4th place, and now really can start to turn his hand to trying to overhaul Salvatore Tinio. The race leaders Marco Helastangas and Pavel Leftrov, they have rather checked out and headed off into the distance, but this now, with the demise of Oliver Freymuth, is elevated into being the fight for 3rd place. They saw the double waved yellow flags. That is for Claudio Formenti, who hopefully will be recovered at that gravel trap in fairly short order. Here is another look at it, going all sideways, and then fortunately bouncing off the tyre wall rather than crunching into it. I don't think there's too much damage done to the Sat. If they can get that out to the gravel trap, he should be able to rejoin the action through the hairpin once more. 12 minutes into this penultimate race of the season, and we have been treated to an absolutely fantastic fight between these 4 Ginettas. Start off as the fight for 4th. It's been elevated to the fight for 3rd because of problems for this car. that of the German driver Oliver Freimuth, and that also has potentially very, very significant bearing on the points situation. Freimuth was certainly in the mix coming to this weekend, but she's in this race, and even if he does rejoin, going to see him, I think, possibly slipping back into the clutches of Blomstedt and Helle Stangas. And certainly Blomstedt and Helle Stangas have got everything going exactly as they should at the moment. They are out clear at the front of the field. Using all the road again, Stefanelli, the same going for the fourth placed car in the queue of Gianluca Carboni. There is Carboni, headlights ablaze, really pushing on. Now Luca Magnoni, you just wonder how quickly that orange Ginetta G55 will be able to go once it gets released into some clear air, because the problem for Magnoni is he made that poor start and thereafter has been rather caught in the traffic, and that has really got in the way of his ability to make progress. We've still got the wave yellow flags for the beached Seat. Again, Luca Magnoni applying the pressure, and this time he's got a good opportunity to draw alongside Salvador Tinio, but the road flashes to the left, then the right. It means that Tinio is able to move across and cover the line, so there's no way through. Consequently, for the bright orange Ginetta of Luca Magnoni, though looking to line up the pace and possibly has a slightly smoother exit from the hairpin this time around in comparison to Salvador Tinio. It means that as the pair of them conclude the lap, this is the best opportunity that Magnoni has had for the race so far to really launch a little bit of a challenge into turn one. Let's see if he's going to be able to take advantage of that as he runs downhill through the first turn, and now as well you can see Tinio just starting to possibly ask a little bit more of his tyres than he was at the start of the race. We're on to lap 8 now, and Salvador Tinio, just see the rear of that Ginetta G50 beginning to try and make a bid for freedom as he got the power down, climbing uphill out of the opening turn. And again, running a little bit wide there, Salvador Tinio. This is starting to become very promising for Luca Magnoni. Magnoni just sticking to the racing line now. Seeks to pounce, saw a gap to the inside. It didn't quite manifest into a cast iron overtaking opportunity, but what he's doing is he's forcing Salvador Tinio to use much more of the road than Tinio would like to be doing. That means that Magnoni knows that it's only a matter of time before Salvador Tinio makes the mistake that's really going to open the door to him. The problem being, of course, is that as that duo battle, it brings this man, Stefano Stefanelli, into play as well. All the while, though, the pace that they have been running has rather allowed them to shake off the attentions of Gianluca Carboni just a little bit further back down. Now you can look back, yeah, there he is. He's about 3 seconds or so adrift of this excellent scrap for third place. It's still Marco Helle Stangas who leads from Pavel Leftrov. Here is Helle Stangas. We've barely seen anything of the Finnish Ginetta G55 pilot. Helle Stangas making the move up from Scandinavian Porsche Carrera Cup competition for 2015 and has adapted very, very well. He and Frederick Blomstedt have been regular podium contenders and front runners all year long. Second place Pavel Leftrov was so spectacular in Spa, and Misano clearly doesn't quite have the car underneath him this weekend, and he's now some 6 seconds back from Helle Stangas. This will be pleasing for Marco, particularly as well as this fantastic fight for third is then almost 14 seconds or so back down the road. But the race is only a couple of moments away from being turned on its head somewhat, because the pit window will be open for 10 minutes once we have got to 30 minutes running. As now Luca Magnoni goes to the move on Salvador Tinio, and that is where he rehearsed it a lap ago. This time around Tinio just didn't have the grip available to him to close the door, as Oliver Freimuth rolls down the pit lane to rejoin the fray. He will be anxious to salvage whatever he can from this race. So now that Luca Magnoni has passed Salvatore Tinio, this is the first time in the race that Luca Magnoni has been released into some clear air. Meanwhile, that is good to see. The slightly errant Seat of Claudio Formenti is back and up to speed. Here is another look at the move from Luca Magnoni, absolutely beautifully executed. Just tucks out at the last moment, and by the time that Salvatore Tinio sees him coming, there is nothing he can do about closing the door and consequently easing past and through for Luca Magnoni. And now Salvatore Tinio is coming under a little bit of pressure as well from Stefano Stefanelli. Stefanelli will be handing over to Luca Lorenzini. Midway through the race, he would like to head into the pit window, at least with a scout to his credit. Now, we saw Stefanelli a couple of laps ago looking to line up a move as Tinio looks to challenge the outside of Magnoni. Leaves a little bit of an opening, doesn't it, for Stefanelli, but Stefanelli can't quite convert that into a way past. Got a little bit close between the pair of them as we are into lap 10 now. We are just about 19 minutes into the race, so we've still got the meat of the race ahead of us, but this battle has been as intense as any we have seen during the 2015 season. Downhill again. Now, are we going to see a repeat of the move from last lap? No, we're not. Stefanelli, though, certainly had seen the efforts of Luca Magnoni, was looking to repeat the trick. Couldn't quite do it, as Luca Magnoni, now in third, is easing clear of what has become a two-way fight for fourth place. Sky blue car of Stefano Stefanelli in pursuit of Salvatore Tinio in the red machine. These are two combinations where we will be seeing the driver switch midway through the race. Roberto Gentili, who has been spectacular more often than not in 2015, taking over from Tinio. Here is Pavel Lefterov, Bulgarian driver, not having things going his own way quite today. And in fact, Luca Magnoni is not too far adrift. I just wonder if there was a mistake off camera from Lefterov, because he's nowhere near now Marco Stangas, and he would appear to have lost several seconds on this last lap. Across the line now comes Pavel Lefterov as the pit lane is open, so the pit window is open. There is Luca Magnoni, and so just wonder what happened to Lefterov. Hope it's not a mechanical issue for the Bulgarian, because again that would be extremely disappointing for him. But at the same time, we haven't seen Lefterov making anything in the way of driving errors. So again, Stefanelli looks to challenge the inside of Tinio. He can't quite squeeze past, but Stefano Stefanelli certainly fond of backing himself on the brakes, and why not? Particularly as Luca Magnoni has broken away. Yeah, there you see Pavel Lefterov has suddenly dropped to almost 12 seconds back from Frederick Blomstead. So clearly something, either a temporary loss of power, maybe an issue with selecting gear, or a slight half spin, has really broken apart the battle for the lead of the race. Into the pit lane is Claudio Formenti, and that is our first driver change. Formenti handing over to Enrico Butera. Also in is Gianpiero Cristoni, and that is Pierluigi Veronese, who will be taking over at the wheel of the number 9 car. So a couple of teams opting to play the strategy card nice and early in the pit window, whereas I would suspect that Salvatore Tinio and Stefano Stefanelli are more likely than not going to be staying out as late into the pits as they dare, because at the moment they are hanging on to the coattails of the emerging battle for second place. They're certainly well in contention for a podium finish when we do get towards the end of the race. More importantly, both drivers, after maybe a slightly erratic start to the race and maybe slightly over-vigorous defence, now getting into rhythm. Now, here into the pit lane is Pavel Lefterov. This is going to be the first indication as to whether or not all is as it should be with the Lotus Evora, which runs down the pit lane, rolls to a halt, and the Volvo racing team get to work cooling the car down, checking the tyre pressures. There's certainly nothing there which seems to indicate they've got any particular concerns. Also into the pit lane now is the number 7 car, which had been so prominent in the hands of Salvador Tinio. Roberto Gentili takes over from him, and all the while at the front of the field, Marco Helle-Stangas continues on his way. Now, what we've seen strategically throughout most of this season is that Helle-Stangas and Blomstedt do pretty much exactly half of the race each in terms of the driver shift. Also in is Gianluca Carboni, but he is going to be completing the whole race distance solo, so he just can have the luxury of getting a little bit of a drink on board. So we've got 26 and 3/4 minutes remaining. We're just approaching half race distance in the penultimate race of the year here in Mugello for the EUROSERIES by Nova, and it is Marco Helle-Stangas who is out front at the head of the field, as he has been throughout the entirety of the race. Stangas heading out of the hairpin through to complete another lap. His lead is going to be absolutely monumental, just because many of his key rivals have already come into the pits nice and early in this pit window, and that is meaning that essentially Helle-Stangas is currently racing the clock. He's racing cars that he can't see. It's now all about keeping that rhythm, keeping the car as smooth as possible, not overly exerting himself, not risking the tyres, not risking the machinery. And he has also just set the fastest lap of the race as well, 1:57.648, a real elevation of pace towards the end of his stint. Marco Helle-Stangas, as he's got the tyres up to optimum operating temperature, and also he's just burnt off a little bit of the fuel load, which means that the car a little bit lighter, possibly a little bit more nimble than it was right at the start of the race. You can see just through the poise of the car that Helle-Stangas, he's not taking risks, he really is pushing, and he's just dancing on that razor's edge between having the car perfectly balanced and maybe moving around. That's where you want to be in cars with a lot of aerodynamic grip. You want to just be on the cusp of the car moving, but not pushing it too hard, not getting yourself into trouble, having a spin. More pit stop action, meanwhile, is underway. And into the pit lane for Kieran Gallagher. Gallagher hops out, and that is going to be Andrea Marcassini who takes over. And well, we saw overtaking action from Gallagher early on. He hands over the car to Marcassini in one piece. As into the pit lane now, just over half race distance, is Marco Helle-Stangas. That is going to be to hand over to the former Formula 1 2-litre racer in the United Kingdom, Fredrik Blomstedt. Blomstedt, the Swedish driver, waits for Helle-Stangas to roll to ahoy. The Nova race team, I think, will be very, very pleased with the way that Helle-Stangas has gone, and indeed that is proved by the congratulations proffered. Now here is a replay of a huge moment for one of the Ginettas, and that is Roberto Gentili, who came very, very close to having an absolutely monumental accident. What that's also done is given Gianluca Carboni the opportunity to possibly gain a little bit of ground. So here is Pavel Lefterov, his pit stop served nice and early. Essentially, Lefterov is currently racing a car, that of Fredrik Blomstedt, which is static in the pit lane. Lefterov just having the car move around a little bit underneath him, possibly more than he'd like. One of the real beauties of watching Lefterov race in the past couple of rounds has been just to see the way that the Lotus has danced limit of adhesion, but you can see now that Fredrik Blomstedt is going to emerge from the pits with a fairly chunky advantage from Lefterov. Lefterov just about to approach the final corner of the lap now. He's got Oliver Freymuth ahead of him. That's not a battle for position. Freymuth, of course, running into trouble a little bit earlier on in the race. As now out of the pits comes Frederick Blomstedt, so he's essentially got the length of the start and finish straight in terms of advantage that he now holds over Pavel Lefterov. It's back into the pits. Disaster, or is it for Freymuth? In fact, this is more likely than not mandatory pit stop he's going to have to serve, as his original pit stop for that mechanical issue was out of sequence. Indeed, that's the case. The team get to work on the car, just making sure that everything is as it should be. It's Frederick Blomstedt just getting a sense of what the temperature is like in his Michelin rubber, making sure that everything is working. And that is really nice outlap from Frederick Blomstedt, just using all the curb as he needs to, and that's really the sign of a driver who's completely confident in their machinery, that they're able to push from the outset. They're taking big bites of curb, they've got the car moving around underneath them, but they don't look particularly as if they're on the edge of having a major moment. And now the opportunity for Frederick Blomstedt is to try and break clear. We're approaching 60% race distance. The pit window only going to be open for another minute or so, although all of our front runners have made their pit stops, so we believe. Didn't see Luca Magnoni coming to the pits, but Magnoni would be closer anyway in terms of relative position to Pavel Lefterov in comparison to Blomstedt, who flashes through, completes another lap. A little bit of insight from the pit lane as on the brakes, steeply downhill into that first turn. Of course, the scene of the fastest ever accident in MotoGP for Marc Marquez a few years ago before climbing uphill. And one of the really beautiful things about this Mugello circuit is that the corners just flow one after the other. It doesn't feel like it's a contrived track. The curves are perfectly situated in relation to the natural contours of the Tuscany countryside. It's a nice wide layout as well, plenty of overtaking opportunities, and also a lot of mid-speed corners that the drivers can really attack. So the pit lane is now shut. Everybody has been through and had their pit stops. So it's going to be at the end of this lap that we will get a clear indication as to what the race order is, and I think more importantly what the exam questions for some of the drivers a little bit lower down the pack are, in terms of beginning to chase their way on up through the order. It's Frederick Blomstedt, been and gone, and you can look back down the track and there's absolutely nobody there. It's going to be fascinating to see the interval between Blomstedt and Pavel Lefterov. And after the last couple of events where it was Lefterov who was doing all the winning, the boot very much on the other foot on this occasion. A little bit of traffic possibly for Frederick Blomstedt to contend with. That is Enrico Patera in the Seat Leon. Great to see that that car got recovered back into the race. As over the line then for Frederick Blomstedt in the lead, and he will be looking forward to the next 10 laps or so around this magnificent Mugello circuit. The race is certainly he and Marco Hiller-Stangas' to lose, and the way that Blomstedt has driven throughout the course of 2015, it's very hard to believe that if anything were to go wrong it would be a result of driver error. But there is the matter of traffic, of course, to deal with. There's also the ever-present possibility of a safety car intervention. Now here is Luca Lorenzini having taken over from Stefano Stefanelli, and Lorenzini is being fed out into a good piece of track. There is meanwhile Luca Magnoni. Now, was that Magnoni ahead of the Evora of Pavel Leftrov? We'll find out in a couple of moments' time. So here is Luca Magnoni then in second place, and yes, he has moved up ahead of Pavel Leftrov. So Pavel Leftrov has clearly got some sort of issue at play in the Evora, because he is down into third place and has been jumped by Magnoni. So here is Leftrov. Don't forget that when we last saw Pavel Leftrov, he was essentially going to be second on the road. So Luca Magnoni not only moved past Pavel Leftrov, he's eased away from him. And in fact, Leftrov, as you can see in the background, has got Luca Lorenzini not that far adrift either. And again, Leftrov just doesn't quite seem to have the Evora working to his liking. The car seems a little bit jittery. We've seen Leftrov enjoying the Evora moving around underneath him on several occasions this season, but that is not as the Bulgarian wanted. The car just seems prone to snap on him through some of these mid-speed corners. Again, just the way the car's being corrected a little bit coming downhill through that final hairpin suggests possibly all is not as it ought to be. Nonetheless, Leftrov is there in podium place. Then we've got Luca Lorenzini. Closing up onto his tail is Gianluca Carboni, and it's Carboni, headlights ablaze, who is arguably the man on the move. A little bit quicker on that last lap in comparison to Lorenzini. Leftrov again just not quite making the apex, and this is most uncharacteristic because he was driving so beautifully in Mugello and at Spa-Francorchamps, and giving away a couple of seconds on that last lap to Blomstedt. Then we've got Lorenzini in fourth, Carboni fifth, Roberto Gentili, having I'm sure got his blood pressure back to normal after that huge moment, is there in sixth place. Here is Luca Lorenzini. He's got Gianluca Carboni in the pink Ginetta, just beginning to home in onto his tail. Now, what sort of progress are we going to be seeing? Well, the timing screen suggests that it is still Stefano Stefanelli at the wheel. More information suggests it might be Luca Lorenzini who is driving the car. Nonetheless, it is showing strongly. Here is Gianluca Cristoni. Then we've got Roberto Gentili trying to close up, as well as a big moment from Gianluca Cristoni, very exuberant with the right foot. The rear of the car just beginning to slide a little bit. Again, that suggests that maybe his Michelin tyres, as we head well into already the final 50 minutes of this race, are just beginning to get a little bit past their best. So across the line comes Leftrov. Then we have got the Stefanelli and Lorenzini car. Next along is Gianluca Carboni, and then Roberto Gentili a little bit further back, but it is Carboni who is upwardly mobile and leading his car through the field. He's going to have time probably for 8 more laps by my reckoning, and that could well be plenty for him to snatch fourth, if not third place. Still not convinced that all is as it should be with Pavel Leftrov. So here is the second place car of Luca Magnoni. Now, Magnoni isn't making any progress on our race leader, Frederick Blomstedt, at the moment, but Magnoni has recovered very well from that slightly indifferent start to the race. It would have been very easy as well for Magnoni to be caught up in other people's incidents and accidents during those early stages. That hasn't happened yet. It is Lorenzini in fourth place, and then giving away about a second to Frederick Blomstedt last time around. I think he can live with that, because all the while you can get a sense behind he is pulling away to the tune of a couple of seconds a lap on Pavel Leftrov, and that is, as a result, looking like it's going to be a very comfortable and secure second place finish for Luca Magnoni, but it is easy to say that now. We have still got a lot of racing remaining, and now for our race leader Frederick Blomstead we have got the very active challenge of trying to negotiate and plot a course through the traffic, which can always make things that little bit more difficult. Climbing uphill out of the first turn, more reaction from the pit lane. So for Frederick Blomstead, this is really his biggest risk, isn't it? It's that potentially one of the cars that he's looking to put a lap on mistakes him for somebody who he is battling with, but that doesn't happen on that occasion. He eases past Pierluigi Veronese in the Ginetta, and there you see confirmations we're on to lap 19. Frederick Blomstead, 17.5 seconds clear of Magnoni, 26.5 seconds up on Pavel Leftrov. And now it's going to be a little bit of a case as well of how he manages his pace to make sure, with the clock ticking down, he doesn't have to do any more laps than absolutely necessary, because when you're in this sort of command of the race, you don't want to be putting additional kilometres through the car. Certainly there's no pressure from Magnoni particularly, but Frederick Blomstead also can't afford to relax and back off, because that is time and time again where we see mistakes creeping in. It's when drivers just begin to ease off the pace, they let their concentration slip a little bit, and that's where maybe they might get caught out by a silly mistake or something along those lines. So across the line for Frederick Blomstead into his 20th lap of the race, or rather the car's 20th lap. Blomstead rolling through that absolutely magnificent first turn, uphill into the blind apex left-hander, takes a little bit of effort to plot the right course, then swings through the right, then over the crest and on downhill towards, that seems to turn. Now here is Pavel Leftrov. Oh, and that's a big moment for Leftrov, and around he goes, and well, the Evora has looked a little bit skittish, and Pavel Leftrov into the gravel trap. I just wonder if he's going to get out of there, because the car rolls to a halt. And that is possibly beached, and that would be an absolute disaster from Leftrov. Clearly didn't quite have the equipment as he'd like it, and there's the waved yellow flag, and there is the stricken Evora, so that will be heartening, one would suggest, for Frederick Blomstead. Certainly one rival for whom he can discount coming into the final mix, coming up to put the lap on Oliver Framuth. Well, that's another of the potential race winners who's run into problems early on. So just 9 1/4 minutes remain for Frederick Blomstead. He is leading this penultimate race of the EUROSERIES by Nova season. It's a race that the car that he shares with Marco Stangas has led from the outset. Again, Blomstead just making this look very straightforward. Of course it's not. He is pushing as hard as he dares, but sometimes when it's all working well, it just looks absolutely sublime. So here is Lorenzo Lorenzini. Now where is Lorenzini in relation to Gianluca Carboni? Question mark. Can't see Carboni either ahead or behind him. Possibly find out when we take the long shot along the start and finish straight. Of course, the minds of Pavel Leftrov has promoted Lorenzini. Yes, there he is. Third position. Gianluca Carboni further back, as there is the sad sight of Pavel Leftrov's car being dragged through the gravel trap behind the recovery tractor and that means that the Evora is well and truly out of the race. Great shame for Leftroff, and he joins Mark Spakervos as having been caught out through that bottom turn. Spakervos, it was mid-corner. That was his demise. For Leftroff, it was on the exit. The way that the car just unfortunately thereafter got beached in the gravel trap, and no opportunity for Leftroff to recover himself from there. Meanwhile, Frederick Blomstead up behind Oliver Freymuth. Now Freymuth will know that he is well out of contention. He just wants to keep his nose clean, stay out of trouble, net some points, and so moves smartly to the edge of the circuit. Doesn't provide any obstruction or obstacle to Blomstead, putting a lap on him as Blomstead now accelerates through the final turn. On to the conclusion of another lap. We've got just under 7 minutes remaining. But you can see just how quick McGann is in a straight line. Oliver Freymuth sitting in the slipstream, possibly right behind Frederick Blomstead. Doubt that Freymuth will try to unlap himself into the first corner, but it certainly gives you a tantalising glimpse into the pace that Freymuth would be able to run at had the McGann been all in good order throughout the course of the race. Fortunately not to be for Freymuth, but there is a second race to come, of course, this weekend, the final race of the EuroSeries by Nova season. And Blomstead all the while easing clear of Luca Magnoni in second place. That gap now out to just shy of 20 seconds. Magnoni in turn has got a very, very comfortable advantage over Luca Lorenzini in third position, and so the race as it heads towards its final stages, possibly settling down in terms of the on-track battle, certainly not settling down. However, in terms of the ability of this Mugello circuit to catch drivers out, we saw that with Frederick Blomstead. We have, or rather we saw it with Pavel Leftroff. Frederick Blomstead, of course, our race leader. So Leftroff having that problem. Blomstead still pressing onward. We also saw Mark Spakervos, who has been impressive when you've seen him this year. He fell by the wayside early on. All the while these laps are being reeled off with almost metronomic rapidity by Frederick Blomstead, with exactly 5 minutes left on the clock. I think we've got time probably for 3 more laps as over the line goes Blomstead. The team will be keeping him well appraised on the radio about exactly how long remains. Here is Luca Magnoni, who just picks his way past the Seat of Enrico Patera. Luca Magnoni, very secure second place. Again, just a question mark for me about the straight line speed that Magnoni's got at his disposal. He's been able to run with cars, but not possibly pass them in a straight line. That, I'm sure, is something that the team will be exploring going into the second race of the weekend, if there's anything they can do that will possibly bring them up to speed just a little bit more. Magnoni in turn has got an awful lot of ground over the group behind. Meanwhile, recovering into the pit lane is Pavel Leftroff, so he has been able to get the car fired up from the gravel track, but I suspect that that is absolutely full of stones and that there is not going to be an awful lot that Pavel Leftroff can do from there. Is several laps off the running as well. Meanwhile, Luca Lorenzini on this 23rd lap of the race has got enough of an advantage, I think, in third place not to unduly worry unless he begins to encounter a little bit of trouble. Luca Magnoni almost towards the end of the lap. about to start the penultimate lap of the race very, very shortly. So across the line now is Frederick Blomstead, our race leader, on to start what for my money is the penultimate lap here in Mugello. He's got an absolutely gigantic advantage now at the front of the field, Blomstead, mainly because he's just been absolutely relentless in the pace that he has been setting during the course of the stint, even with the race effectively won and apparent that it was looking very, very good for he and Marco Stangas early on in this second phase of the race. Blomstead has been consistent and metronomic with the pace that he's been setting. So now just about a lap time left in the race as Blomstead swoops downhill out to the furthest extent of the circuit for starting to climb uphill the long run. Not quite back towards the pits because it takes in a slight additional loop, but nonetheless that is the direction in which Blomstead is heading. Luca Lorenzini in that third position, clear of Gianluca Carboni. That's Roberto Gentili in fifth place. Gentili, but for that massive moment shortly after his pit stop, may have been able to have staked a little bit of a claim to challenge for the final spot on the rostrum. But nonetheless, fifth place will be a good finish for him, provided that nothing goes wrong through the closing moments of the race, as now accelerating out of the final turn, along over the grid hatchings, and this is going to be the start of the final lap of the race for Frederick Blomstead. Across the line he goes. Oliver Freymuth there second on the road, but a long, long way down, because if you have just joined us, of course, Freymuth suffering mechanical issues in the very early stages, and that caused him to make an unscheduled pit stop and therefore put him out of the fray. Anxious moments on the pit wall, of course, because this is really the lap that the leading teams dread. They'll all just be listening out to the far side of the circuit, waiting to hear the engine note of the race leader, the throttle being picked up in all the right places, the engine sounding on song where it needs to. And certainly for Frederick Blomstead, he'll be sitting in the cockpit listening for everything to be working exactly as it should as he climbs up over the crest of the hill. Just a few corners remain. This has been an absolutely imperious performance from Marco Stangas and Frederick Blomstead. It's been the sort of performance really that the pair of them have been threatening all year long, adapting very, very well to Ginetta G55. Just offers that additional punch in terms of torque and straight line speed, and they have taken full advantage of it, as now just one corner remains for Frederick Blomstead as he heads into the left-hand hairpin now, and it is looking as if it is going to be victory in the penultimate race of the 2015 Euro Series by Nova, accelerating out of the final turn now. The checkered flag is poised, ready and waiting. It's being waved, and it greets our winners, Marco Stangas and Frederick Blomstead. Absolutely brilliant drive from them, and they take a absolutely crushing victory. And the Stangas congratulates the Nova Race team on the pit wall. Handshakes and congratulations all around, and quite rightly so. Here is Luca Magnoni. He is going to take a super second place finish. And Magnoni really has driven a very nicely balanced race. He kept his nose clean in that frenetic early battling. Now, what about third? It isn't going to be Luca Lorenzini, because he goes very, very slowly through the final hairpin, and it means that somehow able to sneak his way past is Gianluca Carboni. It's Gianluca Carboni who takes a dramatic third place at the very, very tail end of the race from Luca Lorenzini. Lorenzini will be absolutely devastated with the way that suddenly bit him in the tail late on. So another very enjoyable race for the Euro Series by Nova, and our race winners Marco Stangas and Frederick Blomstead heading into the pit lane. They will very shortly be heading to Parc Ferme and the podium. A look then at the final results. Stangas and Blomstead win it from Luca Magnoni, then Gianluca Carboni from Stefano Stefanelli and Luca Lorenzini. Roberto Gentili and Salvador Tinio an excellent fifth, clear of Cristoni and Veronese. Then Marcanese and Gallagher. Oliver Freymuth several laps down with his problems early on. The same for Pavel Levtrov. He'll get 10th place classification, but hugely disappointing nonetheless. So the roll down to Parc Ferme and celebration time for Frederick Blomstead and Marco Stangas. Waiting for the door to be popped open, and then the celebrations can well and truly begin in earnest. Out hops Blomstead. Team haven't quite made it down yet, but nonetheless the number one signal, the celebrations well underway from Blomstead. What feels like a very long time later, Luca Magnoni about to roll in to Parc Ferme in second place, and I suspect a slightly surprised Gianluca Carboni for third place after a problem for Luca Lorenzini just at the very end of the race. Well, this Mugello track is thirsty. I just wonder whether Lorenzini possibly found himself running a little bit of short of fuel late on. So we can enjoy Gianluca Carboni pushing hard in super slow motion. The same for Luca Magnoni. And our race winners Frederick Blomstead and Marco Stangas, now being interviewed in Parc Ferme. Two very happy drivers then as we take a look back at the highlights of the race. And off the line, it was Marco Stangas who got the jump away from a slightly sluggish Luca Magnoni, and that allowed Pavel Levtrov to challenge into the first turn. The real story of the opening stage was the absolutely brilliant fight we had for fourth place. Salvador Tinio easing past. Kieran Gallagher was another driver who was upwardly mobile in the early stages, whereas others found the going a little bit tougher. Claudio Formenti 0, tyre wall 1. But then Luca Magnoni began to show his hand, and he began to move up into podium contention. Oliver Freymuth suffered mechanical issues just before the pit window opened. Pavel Levtrov, a double winner in Misano, seemed slightly out of sorts as Oliver Freymuth was encountering all sorts of bother. It was a seamless pit stop for Marco Stangas, the race leader, handover to Frederick Blomstead. Thereafter, Blomstead dominated as Levtrov hit trouble great drama for Luca Lorenzini. He slowed through the final turn, and that allowed him to get jumped at the flag by Gianluca Carboni. But it was a dominant victory for Marcelo Stangas and Frederick Blomstead. An absolutely perfect performance. They take the dominant win here in Mugello in the first race of the weekend for the EUROSERIES Bonova. Luca Mainoni in second place and Gianluca Carboni in third. Celebration and thumbs up from Frederick Blomstead, and rightly so, in Parc Ferme. He and Marcelo Stangas did absolutely everything perfectly, and they have taken, in the event, a very dominant victory. But plenty of talking points, as ever, at the end of what has been an excellent race. Well, that's it from this first race in the EUROSERIES Bonova here in Mugello. Thank you very much for joining us, but we will have all of the action to come very, very soon from the final race of the season in the EUROSERIES Bonova. Make sure that you join us for that.